So welcome everybody. It's great to see so many of you here, and many of you are also tuning in online through our service. It's a wonderful opportunity for us today to listen to Professor Donald, who my colleagues and I, as we've been slowly introducing you to, many of them his work has had a lot of impact on our work. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the director of the Kaput Center. I see a few new faces here. Welcome. This is part of our ongoing interdisciplinary colloquia series, where we reach out to various disciplines that intersect with the education of math, science in our world today. And this has been the 6th year that we have been conducting a series of talks. They are streamed online, and for those of you new here, they're also archived online after the talk, and that has provided, I think, a very valuable resource for many other researchers and graduate students around the world, and that's what they've told me. We're only going to add increasing value to that archive today by listening to Professor Donald's talk. Let me just give you a little bio and then I'll sit down. Merlin is the Emeritus Professor at the Department of Psychology at Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. He's a cognitive neuroscientist with a background in philosophy. He obtained his PhD from McGill in 1968, and subsequently he spent 2 years at the School of Medicine, Yale University, as an NRC postdoctoral fellow, followed by almost 3 years at the West Haven Veterans Administration Medical Center as a research neuropsychologist. He has been at Queen's University since 1972. His earlier empirical work was in the field of human cognitive and clinical neuroscience, with a specialization in electrophysiology. For the past 15 years, he has been interested in human intellectual and cognitive origins. He is trying to understand how the slow-moving biology of the brain can deal with the changing cognitive ecology. Merlin has written many books, including Origins of the Modern Mind, 3 Stages in the Evolution of Culture and Cognition, and A Mind So Rare, The Evolution of Human Consciousness. These 2 books especially has had a great impact on some of the work of the Kaput Center and associates around the world. I will just want to say one more word, that it was actually Jim Kaput who introduced the work of Merlin Donald to many of us in the field of mathematics education, and was particularly with Merlin's book, A Mind So Rare, really thinking in very different ways from the past, and had a huge impact through Jim on how we have begun and continue to think today. So I think our friend would be especially happy to see Merlin here today at the Kaput Center. Welcome, Merlin. Thank you for being here. We've had wonderful conversations already, and we're all very excited to hear what new ideas you have for us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm actually quite honored, especially by the fact that Louis traveled up from Mexico to hear this talk, which I think is astounding, and I'm very honored. And I'm very sorry that I never had a chance to meet James Kaput. It sounds like a very interesting person, and I was very sorry to hear about his tragic death and the way it happened. I want to talk about really about the evolution of the modern mind, and I use the word modern because it's not just any mind we're talking about here. That is, the modern mind, is my way of thinking, is quite different from archaic humans, has distinctive features and so on. And so, in a way, the problem from a neuroscientist's point of view is how do you get from a primate brain, which is basically what we have, a primate brain design, to where we are today. Another way of putting it, I was just discussing with Louis, is the point I made in A Mind So Rare, which is that we have a tiny window of conscious awareness in life, in which we do most of our learning and most of our remembering. And when that window is damaged, our life, in a sense, comes to an end. People who have a certain type of episodic memory loss live in an eternal present. It's like they're always waking up from a dream. They have no awareness of what has happened, except what happened prior to their injury. So how did we take this tiny window of awareness, a few minutes long, and turn it into the world that we've developed, and the mental world I'm talking about, as well as the physical world? Well, I started to think about this a very long time ago when I was a student, but I never got a chance to do it. Being an academic, I had to secure a tenure and a professorship before I could take a risk like that. And in my 40s, I started to think about this more seriously. And I discovered that we needed to combine a variety of disciplines. When you combine so many disciplines, you run into the problem of verbiage of language and the fact that the same word can mean such different things in different disciplines. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to use a lot of images to try to disambiguate some of the things I'm saying. Because in any single discipline, you may have agreements, especially if it's narrowly defined over terms. But when it comes to big ideas that cut across many fields, you have to sometimes either coin new expressions or use the simplest possible way of saying things. Major facts about human cognition, keeping in mind that I'm contrasting it with every other type of cognition that we know about, including our closest relatives, primates. We live in cognitive communities. That means to say we trade ideas and memories that create mind-sharing cultures. When I say mind-sharing, just think on this. Human organization within social structures is based on communities of trust. That is to say, when I know you know certain things, I can trust you with certain things that I can't trust someone else with. We have, this is very important in the internet, but it's also fundamental to social life. And other creatures just don't do this because they don't have mind-sharing communities. They don't read one another's minds. They don't have any way of trading in ideas. Psychology has suffered from what I call the solipsistic assumption, or the myth of the isolated mind. A lot of it was built on the notion that you are a processor. Something comes out, process it, something happens, and something comes out. I'm arguing that it's not really that way at all, and that's not the way things evolve. These cultures govern empathic, emotional, and cognitive attunement among their members, and therefore one has to think of the human cognitive system as being bigger than the individual. Having been an academic all my life, I know how unoriginal most people are, and that includes academics. We are able to add a few small bricks to the edifice if we're really lucky before we expire. But in fact, most of what we are and most of what we think is entirely defined by the where and when we're born and what language we speak and so on. And so that is a very important fact of life, because it means that, in a way, your mind is a carrier of the culture you've been brought up in. You're a carrier. You transmit it to your children, unconsciously perhaps, because it's the only thing you know. But in a way, you've been structured somehow by the environment you live in, and that includes technology in a big, big way. The primate brain is a conservative device, and if you look at what we know about the anatomy of the human brain, it's quite clear that, what's that? Getting feedback. Some kind of feedback problem with the microphone, I'm sorry.
Yeah, hit it that way.
Is it all right? Okay. That's the solution to the most high-tech
most technological
thing,
problems.
So the primate brain is basically a certain type of variation on the mammalian brain, and virtually every structure in the human brain is present in some form or another in chimpanzees. You can say that certain areas are a little more differentiated in humans, but it isn't radically different. All of the transmitters, neuromodulators, and so on that we have seem to be not only in common with other primates, but with most other mammals. And therefore, we can base many models of the human brain on research on other animals. The problem with this is that how do you build a symbolic universe such as we live in using a messy analog device like the primate brain? I would point out something in advance of my theory, that socially isolated humans are amazingly limited